Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Tech Forum session. I'm Hannah Johnston, Product Coordinator at BookNet Canada. Welcome to If We Knew Then What We Know Now, COVID-driven initiatives with staying power. Before we get started, I just wanted to take a moment to recognize that BookNet Canada acknowledges its staff, board, and partners work upon the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, Wendat, and Huron Indigenous people, the original nations of this land. We endorse the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada and support an ongoing shift from gatekeeping to space making in the book industry. So now let me introduce our first presenter. Athmika Punja works closely with sales, fulfillment, and customer service on projects to improve the supply chain. Her team at Penguin Random House Canada covers customer operations, sales assistance, publisher operations, as well as co-op processes. Prior to her 4 years there, she was in operations at ECW Press for 4 years. So Athmika, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Hannah. So at Penguin Random House, we have always made a significant investment in our supply chain, logistics, metadata, and customer facing service levels. I get to work with some incredibly smart teams of IT professionals, developers, strategic project managers, and they are heroes who work on 89 applications that are in use by our editorial, sales, production, design, inventory, marketing, insights and analytics, publicity, and warehouse, transportation, accounting, HR, etc. All of those teams. And before COVID, the space that my team in Canada occupied was making sure that our Canadian employees and customers were represented in how some of those tools get built and deployed across all sales and publishing teams, as well as our customers. So my team also provided administrative support with span planning, metadata processes, data warehousing, sales asset creation, and printing and mailing, and coordinating a myriad of processes. We supported onboarding new Penguin Random House Canada employees, as well as new customer accounts. But because of the really impressive IT infrastructure, the space where my team had to design and implement Canada-specific solutions was often just exception management or areas of the business that weren't driving enough high-level value to warrant a North American solution. So when COVID hit, the amount of chaos that hit every one of our workflows and processes here was like the litmus test from hell. Exception management became a daily requirement. The operational impact was immediate. Managing widespread regional and store closures, delivery delay tracking, rejected trailer loads, made our relationship with our customer service team and our transportation teams and even our carriers an hourly necessity. The issues that we would have had to navigate once a month became a daily occurrence. And we ship thousands of books to hundreds of locations every day, Monday to Friday. And all of our fulfillment systems were set to do this in the most efficient, fastest way possible. So that speed to market, our rapid replenishment practices really hurt us when our system was filling orders faster than we could deactivate an account. So something that, a closure or a change in a store, something that we would once have had weeks to prepare for, we were getting near hours. Similarly, on other sides of the business with printer capacity constraints, our core publishers and client publishers were changing huge swaths of release dates. My team had to mobilize and build reporting to ensure that there was as much internal visibility as well as marketplace visibility on those changes, which again, once would have been like months and months that were happening within weeks. And of course, the jump in online demand and the COVID-associated consumer trends shifted our reporting needs for sales and marketing. And so we began to accelerate work on our data infrastructure side to ensure that the most real-time information was available to inform those teams' decisions. So in all of these examples, the piece that I was grateful for was the speedy mobilization of the teams to build cross-functional processes to manage all of that chaos. Decisions that once would have taken a really long time to get approval on or pushed through and worked on just happened. Everyone felt the necessity and wanted to do whatever we could to ensure that we were supporting our books and our customers as best as possible. Investments that we had already made in digital workspaces really paid off here. We started to see wide adoption and learning around tools like Slack, WebEx, Asana, and even just Excel. And this made cross-functional work far more successful than it had ever been. So things like my team working with inventory and production and with publishing teams or acquiring teams, it became a lot easier to pull all of those groups together because it was such a necessity to do. An example of a fast change that we implemented was actually towards digital galleys. My team had been heavily involved in managing the allocation and distribution of physical ARCs, and really shifting the culture around that to thinking about digital galleys took a lot of work around documentation and retooling the process and making sure everybody had visibility and transparency in how we were successfully deploying digital galleys to face library contacts, our booksellers, as well as marketing and publicity contacts. Another thing that happened was that at the initial onset of COVID, we put an immediate halt to work on all discretionary projects so that those resources could be dedicated to resolving the major challenges. But a really gratifying thing that happened was that as soon as we started to see the market recover, we went back to those projects with this renewed sense of like, okay, we figured out how to do all of this other stuff, so we can definitely do these things that we had planned to do. And we pushed the gas on a lot of key things that we knew would make a difference to our customers now more than ever. We completed a West Coast fulfillment network enhancement to get key titles to our West Coast independent stores even faster. We rolled out a new B2B portal to allow customers 24/7 access to browse catalogs, see title availability, place and track orders in a far more user-friendly environment that like mirrors a consumer shopping experience. We built out a process enabling consumer direct fulfillment for author events and book and ticket orders. We updated our new account process to not just be operational, but to support business development in tracking and managing leads. So more than the actual operational levers that we enhanced and made use of, I'm really proud of and appreciative of the enhancement to the ways of working. Everything from task management to onboarding and documentation. COVID demonstrated for us the importance of investing in how we work within our teams, within the organization, and of course in the marketplace. So I think it's an area that like we were focused on out of necessity last year, but this year we're certainly going to be really intentional about.
Wonderful, thank you, Asmika. So next up is Eulalie Lumsden. Eulalie is the data associate at House of Anansi Press, where she manages bibliographic data. Eulalie started out at House of Anansi as the cross-media assistant and quickly became intrigued by ebook and metadata accessibility. Eulalie continues to be amazed at how much data one book can hold, so I will toss things over to you.
Thank you, Hannah. Okay, so hi everyone. I work at House of Anansi Press, an independent publisher in Toronto, and like many other publishers, over the past year, we've had to shift some of our focus and think about how our books show up in the online market. So at House of Anansi, we've been working quite diligently to revamp our metadata practices. So I'm going to be talking about some of the small but effective ways that we have done that. So of course, one of the biggest changes over the past year has been the lack of in-person browsing. So now that there are less opportunities to physically browse, readers are browsing online shelves a lot more and looking for recommendations that are similar to their interests. So a good way to take advantage of that, of course, is by improving our metadata. So some of the ways that we've been doing that is by improving keyword practices, expanding our long descriptions, and adding publishers' own category codes to our Onyx. I know for a lot of us, we're already using keywords, but we may not realize exactly how important these keywords are for discoverability. So our past approach to writing keywords was more of an off the top of our heads approach. So now we're trying to make it more strategic and meaningful. So on this slide, I have a chart with examples of some of the categories that we're now using in our new keyword worksheet to identify keywords and terms. So one of the categories that we have is key themes and topics. So the book that I have here for an example is Jump at Home Grade 3, which is a math workbook. So for key themes and topics, we have STEM, homeschool, elementary school study materials, mental math, and EQAO. And then another category we have is educator audience and curriculum connections. So for that, we have mathematics. And then we also have a category for media. So for that, we have BrainQuest, Kumon, and Common Core aligned. So just having this has made the keyword process a lot more informed and purposeful. So along with revamping our keyword process, we have also expanded our descriptions to include key text features and Common Core standards. So having key text features outlined in our description helps the book buyer by knowing that the book comes with extra features that will help the reader engage with the text. So an example here is one of our children's books called A Forest in the City. And for key text features, we have diagrams, author's note, glossary, sources, and definitions. Some other things that could be in a book might be like maps or illustrations. So these are just some great things to highlight. So we're also adding Common Core standards to our descriptions. So what are Common Core standards? Common Core is a set of high quality academic standards in mathematics and English language, arts and literacy. These learning goals outline what a student should know and be able to do at the end of each grade. So for example, I'm going to use A Forest in the City again. So for Common Core standards, basically in grade 2, a student should be able to know and use various texts and features to locate key facts or information in a text efficiently. And then for grade 3, a student should be able to ask and answer questions to demonstrate understanding of a text, referring explicitly to the text as the basis for the answers. And another one in grade 3, a student should be able to determine the meaning of general, academic, and domain-specific words and phrases in a text relevant to a grade 3 topic or subject area. So many of our children's titles will have these Common Core standards displayed in the description, just to show the readers, the parents, the educators, what they should be learning and how this text will align with that. Another change we've been making is adding publishers' own category codes to our Onyx. So this allows us to create categories for our books to increase discoverability for readers looking for similar categories. And it also makes for easy list curation. So for an example, I have one of our Anansi titles, Frying Plantain. So our categories are book club pick, adult short stories, adult BIPOC voices, adult starred reviews, adult award winning, and adult audiobooks. So we've been in the process of revamping our website, which is still under construction, but the categories we've implemented are with these publishers' own subjects, where we'll work hand in hand with the new website. So our new website is meant to be kind of like a one-stop shop for readers, educators, and sales reps, as well as an in-house tool for searching and list curation. And just lastly, some takeaways. I know that many people in the industry are a little bit scared of moving from Onyx 2.1 to Onyx 3.0, but using Onyx 3.0 gives the opportunity for richer and more meaningful data. It's important to explore now more than ever ways to boost our metadata to make it more accessible and visible to readers and people in the industry. So rich metadata is also key to discovering diverse books. So our Onyx feeds should contain as much information as we can put into it. And of course, the more data we put in, the more benefits we get out. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Eulalie. So next up, we have Jamie Broadhurst. Jamie is Vice President of Marketing for Raincoast Books, Canada's largest book distributor. Jamie has taught in Simon Fraser University's publishing department for over a decade and is also a director on the Vancouver Public Library Foundation Board. So over to you, Jamie.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for the invitation. And I just want to thank my colleagues. It's been fascinating listening to what's been going on at other houses. It's very similar to what we've been dealing with here at Raincoast. And I guess the one thing that I wanted to do more than anything is shout out, yes, we've been very, very busy here. House of Anansi has been very busy, as has PRH, obviously. But the real heroes through everything in the last 12 months in terms of innovation have been the frontline stores. I think all our colleagues would probably chime in on that point. The most interesting innovation has seen the massive shift in how quickly and how nimbly retailers have been able to respond to the very unique set of circumstances. So what I was hoping to do, if I can, just take a few minutes to call out a particular promotion that we ran last fall as an example of working in partnership with our retailers. And what I'm going to talk about is a promotion we ran promoting Canadian titles, Canadian author titles from Canadian publishers in partnership with the More Canada Gang and with the Department of Heritage, which was a bit of a new partnership. In fact, it was a completely new partnership for Raincoast. On the slide I'm just showing you here are some is a window display from the holiday for Massey Books and a shout out from Book Warehouse here in Vancouver. And so as I said, what I'm going to talk about here is just really what we did around a particular promotion. And at the heart of this, in terms of what we've learned through COVID, is how complex it is, how complicated it is to keep things simple. The number one thing we've been hearing from our retailers is, in terms of staffing issues, in terms of hours that are they're spending dealing with curbside and other things, is if we're going to do anything innovative for them, we have to keep it very, very simple on their side. And to the point where, as someone said, as we were putting together this promotion, we have to make it as simple as breathing for retailers who are dealing with all sorts of things. And so that's what we tried to do here. In terms of who Raincoast is, just a shout out for the fabulous work that BookNet does. I stole a screenshot from the latest Canadian book market, just in terms of the market share for distributors. As you'll see, here's Raincoast, where I just circled us in red. Raincoast is this kind of weird company that we're in fact three things. We're two actual different distribution divisions. We have a division out here in Vancouver, where I'm speaking to you from today. And then we also have a division in Toronto, the Publishers Group Canada Group. So if you put the two parts of us together, we're actually a little bit bigger than we are on this distribution market share analysis. But from our point of view, where we really see ourselves is we're part of this group of the big six of distributors in Canada and the Canadian-owned distributor through all of that. So we are always mindful of the work of our colleagues, the multinationals in particular, and we put ourselves together, as I said, in terms of these two separate divisions, which is Raincoast. This promotion that we ran actually was across both of those divisions, which doesn't always happen. Sometimes we run individual promotions per division. This was an all hands on deck promotion that we did. Raincoast, if I needed to describe us, I always think of us as like a Swiss Army knife. We do many, many different things. We tend to be very, very functional, very, very practical about it. There's lots of technology involved in the different doodads that are attached to the Swiss Army knife, which is Raincoast. Part of that is definitely around systems and programming, and hence I was scribbling notes as people were talking. We ourselves have here in Vancouver, we've got a 5-person systems department that's constantly doing customized and optimized programming for our different customers and our different publishers. It's one of those beguiling facts about publishing is how customized the product SKUs are that we're dealing with when we're talking about thousands and thousands of different SKUs. Raincoast has 2 distribution divisions, as I mentioned, PGC and Raincoast, and we also have a wholesale division, Book Express, which is selling, in fact, many of the books my colleagues have been talking about. We've had the pleasure of selling those on your behalf. And when we ran this promotion this fall, we opened it up to also include BookX titles, thanks to some support from Department of Heritage. And in fact, it turned out that it was Book Express that sold almost half of our total titles that we sold through the promotion. So again, we see ourselves within the ecosystem of the Canadian supply chain, not only as distributors, but also as wholesalers. So it gives us a pretty round view about what's taking place in the Canadian market, all from a slightly Vancouver perspective. So when COVID hit, excuse me, when COVID hit, we, like everybody, use this as an opportunity to think about how we can better support those frontline retailers who really were in the thick of things. The first thing that we launched was what we called an indie bank. So we did programming so that we were able to reserve stock, hold stock, particularly for independent bookstores, so that those hot moving titles would be in stock for them. It involved some programming around EDI and other issues, and daily, or not daily, almost hourly position files that we were sending, and all had to be modified to take this into account. We launched that mid-summer, and we currently have about 500 titles in our indie bank, which are the hot moving titles, and we communicate that with our independent bookstores across the country. We also launched a direct to consumer shipping program to support a couple of our retailers, which started in September and was great fun during the summer. And then, by the way, the image I'm showing you is just a part of our Vancouver warehouse, which is about 100,000 square feet. It's about 2.4 million units of books, and it's about 40,000 distinct titles. So it's, in Canadian terms, it's a fairly large operation. In global terms, we would definitely be what I would characterize as mid-sized. So Raincoast definitely was very, very busy during the first months of COVID, and then end of September, beginning of October, in conjunction with the Department of Heritage and the More Canada group, we wanted to figure out a way to together help the margins for independent books, or for retailers, in fact, across the board in Canada. And so I had to figure out a way that we could run a promotion that candidly would get extra margin, extra points to bookstores in as simple a way as possible. And so kudos to the group here at Raincoast, but also our partners, Department of Heritage and the More Canada working group as well. What we came up with was a channel-specific, title-specific discount promotion, which at the heart of it was we moved away from needing to have a promo code in an order that an account would send. So a promo code normally is the way that you would know that a certain order is going to get more discount. We replaced that with a set of pre-programmed parameters around customer type, book type, and author being with a Canadian designation, to be able to fit the parameters of offering extra discount and hence extra margin for Canadian published, Canadian authored books. We did all of that in pretty short order. We, from proof of concept end of September, we were live within 3 weeks. It took about 100 hours of programming time and work with our reps. We have about 25 reps across the country with the two groups, and in partnership with our publishers and other stakeholders, particularly the retailers. And so we launched all that middle of October. By the end of January, we had given over $150,000 of extra margin, not given, it had been provided to bookstores across the country. We shipped another 30,000 Canadian authored Canadian titles in that period. And just on this slide here, you'll see just some of the images of the best selling books on that promotion. I've also included in this partnership, we were also able to offer a special edition of a really fabulous graphic novel called Cyclopedia Exotica that's coming out in the beginning of April. And it's a shout out to the Indigo special edition that's going to be available as well. So we handle both big accounts and small accounts and everyone in between. And really from our point of view, what it showed was all of the complexity about taking this program had to be on our shoulders and not on the shoulders of the publishers, on the shoulders of our retailers, to the extent that an independent bookstore could be ordering a book and be getting the extra discount without them necessarily being aware that it had fit the parameters of that promotion. And so the keep it simple mantra was our major takeaway from COVID so far. And then what we're doing now in 2021, we're pivoting to sideline business and to gift business and to toy business, and really interested about discussions about publisher added codes and our own way to categorize product, because that's what we're working on right now with the toy, gift, and puzzle market. So stay tuned for more on that later in 2021 from Raincoast. And that's it. That's it for me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jamie. And last but not least, we have Pam and Dave from Indigo. So in her role at Indigo, Pam Estabrook places books by local authors in their stores in Atlantic Canada, Quebec, and Ontario. Pam started out working in their stores over 23 years ago and has been working with local books for the last 15 years. She's based in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Dave Reynolds has been the Associate Category Manager of Local Authors, Western Canada, for Indigo Chapters and Coles since January 2016. Dave started with Chapters as a bookseller in 1997 and has held various positions in the stores and home office since that time. Before becoming a bookseller, Dave received a diploma in film and video from the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology. All right, so over to you, Dave and Pam.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for having us at your forum today. Dave and I will be speaking to you today about two of our initiatives that serve to amplify local, the first being Gift Atlantic. In COVID times, everyone is sticking around close to home, and there's a renewed focus on all things local. This also goes along with one of Indigo's strategies to give our stores a more local feel. We've been doing local displays in close to 100 of our stores for a number of years now, but with these initiatives, we tried to do some new things. Every year, the Atlantic Publishers work with the APMA, the Atlantic Publishers Marketing Association, to put out their holiday gift guide, which features great local gift ideas. Every year, this guide generates a lot of sales for our stores. This past Christmas, that campaign was called Gift Atlantic. So we partnered with 3 Atlantic publishers, Nimbus, Formac, and Goose Lane, on a specific Gift Atlantic promotion. There was a front of store table at our 7 large format Atlantic stores through November and December. The front of store placement was a huge change and crucial to the success of the promotion. The 6 maritime large format stores featured the same 30 Gift Atlantic titles from those 3 publishers, and our store in St. John's, Newfoundland had its own unique table. So we tried some online and digital vehicles we had never used before to promote local books. For example, we had an online shop featuring all of the titles in the Gift Atlantic Holiday Gift Guide. And this was really important as previously we hadn't had an online presence for local books. And obviously during COVID times, online has become so important to our business. We also had a deal of the week offering 20% off those 30 featured titles online for a 2-week period. We had 4 of the featured titles discounted as regional bestsellers in store. And we had several customer emails that featured the deal of the week or the Gift Atlantic online shop that we sent to customers over the holiday period. So Gift Atlantic was a huge success. Sales from the store's tables were 65% stronger than other comparable front of store tables, which was huge and far beyond anyone's expectations. And our online and digital promotions generated a response that was far beyond the sales that were forecasted for online. We almost couldn't keep up with it. We learned some valuable things from Gift Atlantic that helped us to plan our next local initiative. So we found that merchandising was really what made the difference to incremental sales as opposed to discounting, especially at retail. So going forward, we're going to be focusing less on discounting and more on curation. And that's for online and also in-store displays. The featured titles performed extremely well at small format stores, so our mall stores. So even without the front of store presence, those stores did have displays, but they would have been mostly not at the front of store in the what we call the body of store. So we'll definitely include select small format stores in future local initiatives. Another thing we learned is that featuring the same titles on the Gift Atlantic tables for Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Prince Edward Island stores, it was necessary because of the holiday time constraints, but it really wasn't ideal. In the future, we'll do more specific curation, both in-store and online, to make sure that we're reaching our customers with titles that are more relevant to them. So the success of Gift Atlantic led us to expand our local front of store and online initiative to become Discover Your Community, which Dave will talk to you about now. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Okay, so our front of store table, Discover Your Community, which actually started this week, started on Monday. It is in 131 of 178 stores. It's in all of the large format stores except one and a bunch of the Kohl's locations. And it is really based on front of store real estate and feature table availability. Otherwise, we would have used as many, we put it in as many stores as we could, essentially. It's 40 titles per store, and there are actually about 920 unique titles represented in these 131 stores across the country. So they're very regionally targeted. So we're showcasing local interest titles. Right now, we're focusing on a combination of get outside, like, hiking, walking, community, bird guides, things like that. And also books by local authors from across all categories, fiction, nonfiction, adult categories, not kids specifically. And the graphs on the map show, they're not like literal, but in some cases they are, but they basically show the range of the product mix across the country. So in some places where there are not as many local authors, we did have to include some, more nationally known Canadian authors. And also I want to note in Quebec and in 3 Ottawa stores, there's a mix of half French and half English language titles on these tables. And the store in Moncton has about a dozen French language titles as well. So we did this as a spring reset, like I said, starting on April 4th this week, and really encouraging Canadians to, explore their communities and read books by local authors and about local interest in their regions. We also have an online shop that is featuring the in-store titles as well as many more. So it's like an expanded selection on our website. And there are geo-targeted banners so when you're, depending on where you are, when you go onto our site, you'll see a specific, if you click through the link from the email, you'll see a specific banner that is targeted with titles to your region that you're in. For the promotion, we are doing multiple email placements between 6 and 8. 1 to 2 dedicated emails, again with geo-targeting. The first one went out yesterday. We're also doing social media posts, Indigo Instagram, and other promoted geo-targeted ads with local books in the ads. There's going to be a Quill and Choir interview and article about our Discover Your Community. And this is all set at a minimum to run at least 12 weeks, but we are really looking at running it a lot longer. And it will depend a little bit on the success of it, but we generally have pretty good success with doing these local interest tables. They're not like a completely new thing. What's new is that we're expanding it into more stores and moving it to the front of the store. We've had for years, we've had an opt-in program with about half the stores that have local author displays in various places in their store. But this is actually, we're moving it to the front of the store and amplifying it and putting it into as many stores as we can. We're calling them seasons. Like we usually refer to merch periods, which are usually 5 to 7 weeks long. But we're doing this as seasons. And the first one, we're planning on doing April through June. And that is really focused on what I said before, get outside, local travel and outdoor activities. We're also looking at doing a Canada Book Day, April 23rd, across some kind of cross promotion with it. That is definitely on this. The next season after that, July to September, is still tentative, but we've already got some ideas on what we want to focus on. The titles, we'll do a little bit of a refresh with the titles. We'll move to local author fiction and narrative nonfiction, about half, and then the other half will be more local travel and pictorials. And then if we get to keep going, inside of that July to September, we also are looking at doing some kind of a deal of the week cross promotion for Canada Day. And then as we go into the fall, and if we can maintain momentum and we see a lot of success with the program going through the fall, right through to holiday season, we're going to look at refreshing again with titles that are more gift oriented, best of, award winners, that kind of a thing. So that's pretty much it for us.
Great, thank you both. And thanks to all the presenters. That was really wonderful. So we're going to move over to the question and answer period. We have a few for some of the panelists, so I'll invite you to turn your cameras and mics back on and be ready to answer a couple questions. If anybody has any further questions they'd like to put in the chat, you can submit those in the Q&A box and we will answer those promptly. So first one for you, Lily. So somebody asked, for the Common Core standards, how are these determined? So are you using an external consultant, or is the assignment being done by metadata staff the same way you would do for BISAC or, say, FEMA?
So the Common Core standards were implemented by an external consultant, but moving forward, we will be doing it on our own. It's definitely something that can be implemented by your metadata team. There's a website that I can include in the chat if there's not a better way to put it. And it just explains all of the standards. I should also mention that these standards are US based, but I do think it's also valuable for Canadian students.
Great, yeah, thank you. If you're able to share that, I'm sure that would be very helpful and interesting. Next up for Dave and Pam. So in conversations with your colleagues supporting regional efforts in other parts of the country, can you compare and contrast the behavior of Atlantic Canada shoppers, which I know you focused on, to elsewhere in the country?
I saw the question in the chat. I think that's the one that you're referring to. It's so much of my work is in Atlantic Canada, although I certainly, part of my region is Ontario and Quebec as well. In Atlantic Canada, just to give an example, just the publishing is so rich. Even in our what we call our local interest category, so books that are actually placed in the local interest section, we probably have 150 or more titles for Atlantic Canada in the course of a calendar year, as opposed to maybe a dozen for Ontario and Quebec in the same period of time. So if you look at our local interest category, and that doesn't include local authors in fiction or in sports or kids, the 23 Atlantic stores account for half of the sales of the local interest category, and that's out of like 178 stores. So it's phenomenal, and I think it's for Atlanta. I can speak about Atlantic Canada for sure. It's a combination of the rich publishing the incredible titles that the publishers put out every year here. And it's also the interests that people have as well. It's that combination. And you really see local books given as gifts at Christmas, far more in Atlantic Canada than other parts of the country. It's the gift guide that I mentioned. It's unbelievable, the sales that it generates every year. So I think that people in Atlantic Canada just love to read about their heritage, local people's stories. It's an incredibly rich region in terms of, the history. So there's so much to write about. Maybe Dave could speak to the West.
Oops, yes. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it just, between Pam and I buying for the local interest category for Indigo, Pam has a lot of books and a lot of really good books. I do have some as well. The West Coast is probably, out of the rest of the regions that I look after, the West Coast is probably the, BC is very, very strong, very good publishing community, lots of great books. But then when you get into the middle of the the prairies, there's a lot of really independent titles. Like our number one title right now in the category, last couple of weeks, is a self-published title. So, but it's very hyper regional to Calgary. So, but it is like I said, it's only in Calgary stores, but it's the number one title. So Pam and I tend to go back and forth between who has the top titles in the category. But yeah, Atlantic is very strong. So with Discover Your Community, I'm hoping to sort of, not that I want to pull away from Pam's sales in the East, but I definitely want to showcase what we've got in the West to because I know that we can do it. It's just a question of having the right titles and the right stores, and so we'll have to see how it goes. But I think it made the most sense at the time, and they refer to the Atlantic bubble in that question in the chat, and I think that time-wise, that it made the most sense to go with Gift Atlantic because they had, we had stores closed in Ontario, we had limitations in other places, and Atlantic was a little more open, so that made the most sense. And we'll have to see what happens now with Ontario. Looks like they're going to be closed for about a month. So, but yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, thank you. Sort of further to that, how are you identifying the regionality of the authors? So is this something you're manually curating, or are you using the publisher supplied metadata that you're receiving?
I'm doing a combination. So I mean, I have my own little database of Western Canadian authors. All of that information comes to me from publishers and reps. I did also work with a group from the Western, well, it was mostly started by the BC publishers, the ABPBC, and then they worked with the other provincial associations in the West to give me suggestions. And then I took those suggestions when we were doing the planning for the initial titles that are live right now. They gave me suggestions that were regional based on either the content of the book or where the author lives or where they're from. And so I did it in combination. So I'm not sure if Pam wants to talk about how she did it, but.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, it's a combination for me as well, for sure. It's a lot of research, a lot of going through catalogs, but also a lot of communication with publishers. So we try to work as closely as we can with the publishers. I'm really happy to say that I'm going to be working very closely with the OBPO going forward, working on exactly what Dave mentioned about the suggestions given for the displays in the West. The OBPO publishers will be working with me to provide suggestions for titles for the displays in Ontario. So I'm really excited about that. I talked to a lot of the Ontario publishers, but I think this is going to be a way to reach even more of them and work more closely together, which is really important because sometimes it's challenging to get all of the information that you need. and it's great to get it directly from the publishers is ideal. So.
Great, thank you both. Next up, I have a couple of questions for Jamie. So you said that in 2021, you were exploring some new classification options for non-book and gift products. Can you expand just a little bit on that project? Sort of, does this expand on the Onyx classifications for format? Is it BISAC classifications? Kind of, how are you going about this?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you a bit of a teaser on this. Because of the publishers we have the pleasure and honor of representing, we represent some puzzle publishers and toy producers as well. And so exactly as you're saying, the world of book classifications isn't necessarily an ideal fit. And we also have a set of customers who are gift customers who aren't necessarily in our world of books daily. So the long and short of it is what we're really looking to do actually is riff on the idea of collections, of being able to organize thematically product across toy, puzzle, book, make it very, very user friendly. I guess going back to my initial point about keeping it simple, the classic case of that would be a gift account who doesn't need to go super, super deep into the catalog and wants information that's kind of pre-served for them. So we're doing a lot of work on that. And we've taken a look at Onyx, we've taken a look at BISAC, and to be honest, they aren't an exact fit for our business. So much like what we were, House of Anansi, going to have publisher described categories, that's what we're looking to do to launch in 2021. And it's not like we're going to reinvent the world. I don't want to be making some grandiose claim, but what we've really found is the need to be able to customize information in a way that's specific to a set of customers. And the challenge will be, we want to flip back and forth between the two worlds. The world of what, there's a US academic, Ted Strippus, who talks about the concept of bookland, the world of how we understand data in the world of books, and then the world of data outside of books. And what we need to do is we're going to be flipping back and forth between the two. And hopefully all the complexity will remain within Raincoast so that forward facing for a customer, it's very, very straightforward and simple. So yeah, we're actually looking at organizing across categories in terms of what we call collections, looking at very simple designations which don't really fit BISAC or Onyx, and then putting that forward in a very user-friendly kind of platform, riffing on many of the ideas that our colleagues are using in the book world right now.
Well, it sounds amazing.
Yeah. Well, don't forget, I'm in marketing, so it's like everyone else does the complex stuff, and then I simplify it and sell it to people. But that's really the goal, is to make things, all the complexity. I'm sure all our colleagues are saying this, that everything people have been describing is very, very labor and mentally intensive within the publishing firm. But the outside world doesn't want to see that. The outside world is busy dealing with pandemic, dealing with really profound retail conditions. And so what we need to do is make sure it's simple for people out of house.
Great. We did have one other question for you, Jamie, about your non-promo code promo.
Oh, yeah.
Did you find you had a solid buy-in from indies for that?
Yeah,
Did you see sales increasing?
I'm not sure what my colleagues are saying about this, but honestly, what we found this year for the independent channel, this was the best year in terms of percentage of sales for us in the last 5 years. That the independents in particular were remarkably resilient, as were other retailers in Canada. So we saw about a 15% lift in independent bookstore sales around, in part because of the promotion we ran. The thing that I'd also say is when we did the analysis of all the titles, and there was over, I think, 2,000 Canadian titles that we were representing, it would be as what you would expect, that the best sellers at the top sold even more. We did see a little bit of long tail effect, but really it was Canadian bestseller driven, which the thing that we love more than anything was to see in the holiday period so many prominent Canadian published books. in all that social media space and all that bookstore display space was honestly probably the biggest benefit of the whole program.
Awesome. We always love to see that. Always love to see Canadian titles.
Yes. Yeah, we do.
All right. So next we have one question for Athmika. So you mentioned in your presentation that fulfillment was moving often so quickly that it moved faster than a store's closed and open status could be confirmed internally. So can you break down a little bit more what that looked like on your end? So how did you eliminate efficiencies you already had in place without compromising the whole process for your logistics team?
Yeah, that's a great question. So normally, if a store is closing and we have like weeks of notice, the only thing that the things that we would have to do are deactivate the account. We look at all of the open orders so that we can get a sense of like what's the title impact, what's the sales impact. And then we also obviously look at deliveries in progress. And for us, for new releases, we start processing that like 4 weeks before the release date. And for things like that, when that drops into our system for processing, it's almost impossible to eliminate. And we never wanted to because things were changing so fast with new releases, and because of backlist sales running so fast, we really didn't want to slow the system down overall. And so it became about building in daily practice of looking at what the COVID lockdown situation was. What are the possible impacted accounts? We mobilized reps to really do a lot of direct engagement with retailers to see how they were feeling about curbside pickup versus in-store versus their online, and what their approach was going to be with their delivery systems, and whether they would want to keep those orders open, and whether they wanted to start thinking about reducing some quantities if they didn't think they were going to have that full site. So we really started to get proactive about that. And then we also mobilized our customer service team to be very engaged with us on the ops side in Canada and with our sales reps to give us really fast turnarounds on what those open orders were and what those delivery shipments were. And then we created pipelines with our transportation carriers so that we could give them really quick notifications about which stores were rejecting shipments and which stores were, so which deliveries should just like come back to us. And that they didn't need to like store or try to redeliver. And we just became really good at managing those different pieces of information. And we had all of it in the same place. So instead of just handling it as one-offs, which is what we would have done before, we really consolidated the pieces of information so that it would impact everything that was currently in progress in sort of one piece.
Yeah, like you said, it was really about streamlining how you're communicating things internally, right? That was the key. Yeah. So just to close us off, we have one more question. This is for everybody on the panel. So it's a big one, but I think an important one to address. So what are the biggest challenges you feel you're facing as we head into year 2 of pandemic life? So Athmika, I guess we can start with you.
Sure. I think the biggest thing, I think this speaks to the other question about backlist sales and the increase in backlist sales. The consumer shift towards online and the consumer demand across backlist titles, it really shifts the nature of how we should be structuring our businesses. We're so front list focused, like so many of our operations, so many of our selling processes, so many of our marketing workflows are really, really focused on front list. And so we need to really rethink what that looks like in this online, like endless, infinite discoverability space, and with the amount of discoverability that metadata, great metadata practices give to us, we have to start interrogating how we've been doing these like huge parts of our business, because it doesn't really reflect where a lot of our value is coming from anymore. And I think that's going to be a hard thing to do. And I think figuring out how we're going to do that is going to be the challenge.
Yes, definitely. Dave and Pam, what would you say? Biggest challenges headed into year 2 of pandemic life?
I can start if you like, Dave. Certainly, closure of our retail stores is a huge challenge. We're facing probably a great deal of the Ontario stores closing today. So that's a huge challenge. And the other side of that is juggling the increased online demand, often as a result of those store closures. So it's kind of balancing those two sides of the business. Certainly at holiday, it was unbelievable, the volume going through online, and somehow I have no idea how, but our online team managed it. It was absolutely unbelievable. So it's just things are constantly changing, and obviously that's a challenge for everyone. Certainly the closure of retail stores, I think, is the biggest challenge we're facing even a year into this. I don't know if you have something else to mention, Dave.
I know it's exactly the same concern for me. It's very interesting to see local interest specifically. Our business really didn't ever see a lot of online penetration. Really, the local interest business was very heavily retail, people coming into stores and looking for something very regional. And the only time I would see really any online sales was if there was a new title that we didn't have yet, if it arrived in stores late. And now so much of the business has moved, and we're seeing a lot of long tail backlist sales happening through online in our category, which is great to see. But it's like that balance of not having too much inventory in retail stores because of the possibility of them being closed for long periods of time, and having stock in our online channel. We work with a lot of vendors, smaller vendors who we wouldn't normally have stock in our DC, and so their titles will show as 1 to 2 weeks or 3 to 5 weeks on our website. And now it's like, in order to get those sales, we need to like balance that and have some stock in our online warehouse, and that's like, it is a challenge, but it's it's just going to keep happening, I guess. So
Yeah. Jamie, have you seen similar? Do you have similar concerns going into year 2, the inventory issues, rise in backlist? What are you thinking about going into year 2 of pandemic?
Both really smart points. I mean, obviously, one of the big takeaways was that holiday doesn't begin in November, December. Holiday begins really in August and September in terms of forecasting. That was the number one challenge on our side. Couldn't agree more about the renewed focus on backlist. And speaking as a marketer, the fact that we do need to reallocate and rethink where resources go, because the support we provide to backlist is often merely rhetorical, if even that. And I think there's way more that can be done there. I think just having a few seconds to think about it, the two takeaways for the next year for us, first is one of modesty. That honestly, I've been describing everything we've been doing, and our colleagues have been describing things. Everything really is mostly incremental, like in terms of change, moving things forward. And we're just grateful that we are where we are today compared to 12 months ago. And I think really, if I needed to think about the last 12 months and summing it up and going forward, we've discovered it was the year of the reader. That who would have anticipated that we would have gone through this massive retail dislocation and all these challenges, and yet reading rates remain so high. You guys are about to come out with some more data, I think, to show that. We saw that in the United States. We saw that internationally as well. And more than anything, Raincoast was built on Harry Potter. So we saw the power of a good book and what that does to the imagination and to ignite readership. And I think we are seeing something similar through COVID. And so I think that's probably our biggest takeaway going into the next year.
That's lovely. It's a very hopeful perspective to have going into year 2.
Yes, very hopeful in a modest way, but yes.
So last but not least, Eulalie, what are big challenges you're facing heading into year 2?
I think just keeping up with the need for diverse metadata has been challenging. It's kind of a constant battle of trying to figure out how our data is meaningful to our partners and readers. there is so much more that we can do, and there's so much data out there that we haven't grasped yet. It's just a matter of figuring out what people need and what people want to see when they're looking for books, and how to improve the relevance online, especially for our backlist titles.
Definitely that discoverability piece. It's huge, right?
Mhm.
All right. Well, that will close off the Q&A. Thank you so much to Athmika, Eulalie, Jamie, Pam, and Dave for this fantastic panel. We really appreciate having you at this year's Tech Forum. Lastly, I'd also like to thank the Department of Canadian Heritage for their support through the Canada Book Fund. So that is all for today. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us, and have a wonderful day. Take care.